Humiliation was the first thing she tasted on her first day at Sterling Corporation. It was acrid and sharp, even more so than the icy splash of soda that hit her face. In the center of the vast, marble-floored lobby, a smug intern, his privilege worn like a designer suit, had just emptied an entire cup of cola over her head. "Oops," he sneered, a cruel twist of his lips. "I thought you were with the cleaning crew." The sticky liquid dripped from her hair, which was pulled back in a severe, simple bun. It soaked the collar of her plain white blouse, tracing cold paths down her neck. All around her, a wave of laughter erupted, sharp and echoing in the cavernous space. "She looks like she crawled out of the mailroom," someone jeered. But a few hours later, the CEO of Sterling Corp himself would appear before the entire company, bow deeply before this woman, and announce, "Please join me in welcoming the new chairwoman of Sterling Corp, Eleanor Vance." Eleanor stood there, the cheap fabric of her blouse clinging unpleasantly to her skin, the soda still tacky on her neck. Her dark hair, meticulously neat just an hour before, now glistened with sugary residue under the cold, unforgiving lights of Sterling Corp's New York headquarters. She didn't flinch. She didn't wipe the stinging liquid from her eyes. Her gaze, a calm, steady shade of hazel, swept across the crowd of gawking faces. Slowly, unevenly, the laughter sputtered and died, like a faulty engine grinding to a halt. Feet shuffled on the polished floor. A nervous cough broke the sudden silence. The only sound Eleanor made was a faint squeak of her worn-out flats as she shifted her weight, the temporary trainee badge swinging mockingly against her chest. She looked at the intern, Tristan, his name tag read. His hair was slicked back with expensive gel, his blazer perfectly tailored. She said nothing, not a single word, but the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw seemed to suck the very air from the room, making it heavy and thick. Tristan, recovering his bravado, simply smirked, tossed his empty cup into a nearby bin, and swaggered toward the networking mixers buffet. The crowd, like a school of fish, followed in his wake, their whispers trailing like toxic smoke. For a moment, she was alone, her solitary silhouette reflected in the lobby's floor-to-ceiling glass walls, framed against the iconic Manhattan skyline. Her blouse was wrinkled, her gray slacks just a little too loose, as if they were an afterthought pulled from a forgotten corner of a closet. No one looking at her would ever guess she was Eleanor Vance, heiress of one of the country's most powerful dynasties, raised in a world of silent opulence, private tutors, and unshakable etiquette. She didn't carry the weight of her name like a crown. She didn't need to. The Vance name wasn't just about money. It was about legacy, about an old, quiet power that never had to raise its voice. But here, in the cutthroat heart of this corporate beast, she was a nobody. She had orchestrated it that way. The European parent company had sent her to Sterling Corp's U.S. branch to be a ghost, to observe, to listen, to truly understand the company's soul, before she stepped into her role as chairwoman and remade it from the ground up. As Eleanor moved toward the elevators, a clique of junior managers blocked her path, their designer watches flashing under the recessed lighting. One of them, a tall woman with a severe platinum blonde bob and a sneer that could curdle milk, leaned in menacingly. "Isabel." "Excuse me." Isabel's voice was loud, deliberately drawing attention. "This elevator is for staff, not temps." She gestured vaguely toward the hallway. "The service lift is down that way. It smells like last week's garbage, but I'm sure you'll feel right at home." Her companions snickered, their eyes raking over Eleanor's damp blouse and ill-fitting pants. Eleanor paused, her hand hovering over the call button. She turned to face Isabel, her expression a perfect mask of neutrality. But her eyes held a spark, a quiet, controlled fire that made Isabel's smirk falter for a fraction of a second. "I'll take the stairs," Eleanor said, her voice perfectly even. She turned and walked away, her soft-soled shoes making no sound in the sudden, ringing silence. The group exchanged uneasy glances, but Isabel just tossed her hair and stabbed a button. "Whatever," she muttered. "She's a nobody." The lobby was now a hive of activity, a symphony of clinking glasses and forced laughter. Eleanor remained on the periphery, an invisible observer. She watched how people orbited the executives like planets around the sun. Tristan was holding court, his arrogant laughter booming over the crowd. Isabel was nearby, flipping her hair, her laugh a high-pitched shriek. Then Eleanor's eyes caught a different kind of movement. An older woman, perhaps in her 60s, with a sharp gray bob and a gaze that missed nothing. Clara, a senior advisor, a Sterling Corp lifer. Clara wasn't mingling. She stood by a structural pillar, arms crossed, watching the room with the intensity of a hawk. When her eyes landed on Eleanor, something shifted in her expression. It wasn't pity or judgment. It was recognition. As if she saw the steel hiding beneath the damp cotton, Clara walked over, her heels clicking with purpose on the marble floor. Without a word, she handed Eleonora a thick, heavy folder, the kind emblazoned with a stark red confidential stamp. A direct message from the chairman, Clara said, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. You are to review the restructuring blueprint before tonight's closed-door meeting. The folder fell heavy in Eleonora's hands, filled with documents that held the power to shatter careers. A nearby employee, a man with a tie pulled too tight and anxious eyes, overheard and froze. Wait, what? The chairman? Who? He stammered, looking from the folder to Eleonora's trainee badge in utter confusion. Eleonora simply took the folder, her fingers steady, and gave Clara a small, appreciative nod. No explanation, no questions, just a quiet thank you. The man's jaw hung open, but Eleonora was already walking away, the folder tucked securely under her arm. Later, in the break room, a group of marketing associates cornered Eleonora as she reached for a paper towel to dab at her still sticky blouse. One of them, a man with overly gelled hair, leaned against the counter, blocking her way. You know, we do have a dress code here, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. That outfit is screaming thrift store clearance. His friend snickered. One snapped a photo, the flash painfully bright in her eyes. Tagged a hashtag office fail. Another chimed in, her nails tapping on her phone screen. Eleonora's hand paused on the paper towel dispenser. Her shoulders stiffened, the only sign of her rising anger. She turned her head, her calm gaze locking onto the man. Is that all? She asked, her voice soft, but with an edge as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. The room fell silent. The man's grin melted from his face as he struggled for a retort, but Eleonora was already gone, leaving the crumpled towel on the counter. The hallway leading to the executive conference rooms was hushed. She passed a glass-walled office where two employees were whispering, their eyes darting towards her. Is that the Coke girl? One of them, a woman with a designer scarf, pointed and laughed. What's in the folder? Did she steal someone's report? Eleonora kept walking, her pace even, her expression unreadable. She didn't have to respond. Not yet. The weight of the folder in her arms was the only answer that mattered. As she reached the stairwell, a group of interns blocked the landing. The ringleader, a wiry kid with a smug grin, spotted her. Hey, you dropped something, he called out, tossing a crumpled napkin at her feet. The group erupted in laughter. Pick it up, janitor lady, another one taunted. Eleonora stopped. Her eyes flicked from the napkin on the floor to the jeering faces. Slowly, deliberately, she bent down, picked up the piece of trash, and tucked it into her pocket. Thank you for letting me know, she said, her tone so unervingly calm it felt like a slap. The laughter died in their throats as she continued up the stairs, her composure absolute. Unseen, a facilities manager who had witnessed the exchange quietly jotted down the interns' names on his clipboard, his jaw tight with anger. The door to the main boardroom was ajar. She slipped inside. The long mahogany table gleamed under the recessed lights. The room was empty, but the air was electric, charged with anticipation. She placed the folder on the table, her fingers lingering on the cover. For a long moment, she stood by the window, gazing at the city skyline. She wasn't thinking about the soda still drying on her skin or the laughter that still echoed in her ears. She was thinking about the company, its numbers, its people, its deeply rooted rot. She had been sent to excise the cancer. And now, she knew exactly where to make the first cut. Isabel's voice shattered the silence. Hey, this room is for management only, she snapped from the doorway, her crimson dress a slash of garish color against the muted tones of the boardroom. The trainee room is down by the copiers. You know where you belong. Her tone was sharp, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Eleonora turned slowly, her gaze locking with Isabel's. I must have misread the schedule, she said, her voice deceptively gentle. The way she held Isabel's gaze, however, made the air crackle with unspoken tension. Isabel's smirk wobbled. Yeah, well, don't let it happen again, she retorted, turning on her heel and stalking away. Walking past the HR department, a memo on a bulletin board caught her eye, a list of new hires. Her name was scrawled at the bottom in pen, a clear afterthought. A junior HR rep saw her looking and swaggered over. Oh, you're the temp, right? That list is for actual employees, he said loudly, playing to the audience in surrounding cubicles. Don't worry, we'll get you a proper badge. Eventually. A ripple of laughter went through the office. Eleonora's fingers brushed the edge of the paper. She didn't look at the rep. She simply tore the memo from the board, folded it with precise, deliberate movements, and slipped it into her bag. "I'll keep this," she said, her quiet voice carrying a weight that made the rep's grin vanish. As she walked away, a senior HR manager watched from her office, her expression grim as she picked up her phone and dialed a direct line to the board. In the hallway, her own phone buzzed. It was a call from Global Legal. "Ms. Vance," a crisp voice said, "all share transfers are finalized. You are now the legal chairwoman of the U.S. branch. Tonight is your formal announcement." Eleonora paused, her eyes drawn to a black and white photograph on the wall. The founding of Sterling Corp decades ago. Her grandfather was in that photo. She had grown up with the stories, with the legacy of the Vance family. "I'll wait," she said into the phone, her voice low but firm. "I want to see who deserves to remain after the restructure." The lawyer didn't argue. He knew better. The CEO emerged from the boardroom. He was young, impeccably dressed, with a sharp, intelligent face. His eyes immediately found Eleonora in the waiting area. The entire hallway watched as he walked directly to her, without a single word. He bowed. It was a low, formal, deliberate gesture of profound respect that had no place in a modern corporate office. The world went silent. Tristan, standing nearby, dropped his phone with clatter that echoed like a gunshot. Isabel took a shaky step backward, her vibrant dress suddenly looking cheap and loud. The CEO straightened up, his voice ringing with clarity and authority. "Everyone, I would like to introduce the new chairwoman of Sterling Corp's U.S. division, Ms. Eleonora Vance. She will be personally leading our corporate restructure." A collective gasp seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. Heads whipped around. Mouths fell open. Eleonora stood at the head of the great mahogany table, the damning folder open before her. A senior board member, a man who had been with Sterling for decades, rose to his feet. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice filled with respect, "we have been awaiting your direction. Your family's legacy precedes you." The name, Vance, finally sank in. Tristan's face drained of all color. Isabel's pen froze mid-scrawl. The receptionist stared, her fingers hovering uselessly over her keyboard. Eleonora simply nodded and began to speak, her voice calm, her authority absolute. As she laid out the future of the company, she didn't need to smile. She didn't need to raise her voice. The trainee badge was still clipped to her belt, a silent testament to the deception. But the way she held herself, the unwavering steel in her eyes, said everything. The fallout was swift and brutal. By noon, Tristan and Isabel were suspended, pending an investigation into workplace misconduct. The security footage was all the evidence the board needed. The quiet IT guy who had offered her a towel and a junior designer who had given her a kind smile in the hallway were both summoned to her office later that week and given promotions. An email from the European parent company, signed by the global chairman himself, landed in every executive's inbox. It was brief and devastating. Ms. Eleonora Vance has been appointed chairwoman, effective immediately. All personnel are to cooperate fully. The creative director, who had condescendingly knocked over Eleonora's water bottle, sat frozen at her desk. Her snarky social media post about the temp's fashion sense had been screenshotted and sent to the board. By evening, she was unemployed. The story hit the business journals a few days later. "The woman drenched in coke now runs a company," one headline screamed. Tristan's name was ruined. Isabel's online presence vanished. The employees who had laughed now averted their eyes in the hallways. Eleonora ignored them all, burying herself in the work of rebuilding. On her final day in the New York office, Eleonora stood on the rooftop terrace, the wind gently tugging at her hair, which she had let down for the first time. The city sprawled beneath her, a monument of steel and glass. She hadn't needed to shout. She hadn't needed to fight back. She had simply endured, and the truth had done the rest. Her husband appeared at her side, his presence a quiet comfort. He was a tall, unassuming man, but the way the world seemed to still around him spoke volumes. He didn't need to rescue her. She had never needed rescuing. But his hand finding hers was a silent acknowledgement that she was not alone. She had been judged her entire life for being too quiet, too plain, too reserved. But she had learned a long time ago that you don't need to shout to be heard. You just need to hold your ground. And when you do, the world has no choice but to adjust. It always does.